This is Chapter 6, French Revolution and Napoleon, discussion number 3, National Assembly to the Legislative Assembly to the National Convention. So what did the people in the tennis court come up with? Well, first of all, they called themselves the National Assembly. And the first thing they got rid of was the requirement of the servants and the peasants to have to do the corvée and the weak work in order to satisfy the feudalistic requirements of the local lords. They also ratified the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which ironically was partially based on the Declaration of Independence. They declared that all male citizens were equal before the law, that the nobles wouldn't get preferential treatment. Freedom of religion, it wasn't just Catholicism that was going to be allowed. And taxes were going to be charged based on the ability to pay. So if you were a rich noble, count on a larger tax bill than the peasants. They also passed the civilian constitution of the clergy. The most important idea of this was that the church was not going to be an independent operator in French society. It was going to be underneath the power and control of the government. On top of that, all the church lands and the noble lands were going to be seized and sold to help satisfy the French debts. They also wrote a new constitution, which they passed in 1791, which was going to keep the king. They also gave the legislative group, which they were called the Legislative Assembly, the power to make laws, collect taxes, and the power to declare war and peace. And at first, the Legislative Assembly was led by moderates such as Marquis de Lafayette. If you remember your American history, remember that this was the Frenchman that had come over during the American Revolution and had served with General Washington's staff during the American Revolution and helped win the war with us. Now, one of the big problems that France has is that Europe does not trust it. On top of that, what's going on is that they're afraid Austria, Prussia, and even a little bit of Great Britain, is that if everyone figures out that there is a way to get rid of the royal monarchs and France does it successfully, then all the peasants in their countries will find ways to get rid of the kings that are in charge of these other countries. And so they had a vested interest in making sure that the French did not successfully get rid of their king. In fact, Prussia and Austria threatened to attack France unless they put the king back in charge. The king tried to escape, but he was captured. He dressed up like a peasant and tried to get out of town. He did get out of Paris, but he was later recognized, and he and his family were put in house arrest. He was put on trial, and later he was going to be executed as he was declared a traitor to France. Now, the Legislative Assembly was led by a group called the Jacobins. Now, there was two groups of people who were really looking for revolutionary change, that they didn't want to continue living the way that they had with the clergy and the nobles running everything. The sans-culottes were the working class people. But Jacobins are the ones that we really want to pay attention to because they're going to radically change the way things are in France. Now, they were primarily middle-class business persons who had the idea and the theory that the Republic could be a perfect way to run the world. Now, the Jacobins were able to dominate the Legislative Assembly because there were many different factions, and lots of different people had lots of different ideas on how to run France. And because no one was able to really get together and group their ideas and find something that works, the Jacobins were pretty much the only ones who were able to get things moving. And they had the brilliant idea that they were going to create the perfect government where everyone is about making France great. And with that, they were going to make sure that everyone else got their brilliant idea of getting rid of the king. And so they had the Legislative Assembly declare war on Prussia, Austria, Britain, and just about anyone else they could think of because they were going to spread their revolution across Europe. Now, The Jacobins actually got rid of the Legislative Assembly because they didn't like the idea that there was a limited monarchy included in that Constitution of 1791. And they said that we're going to have a new group of people write up a new government, and they called it the National Convention. And then what they wanted from a republic is that people were going to be selected to run the government. Of course, they also were in favor of everyone picking the Jacobins to run the government. Now, the National Convention, as called for by the Jacobins, was run by the Jacobins, and several things that they got instituted into the new government or what they wanted. First of all, they were going to take all the nobility's land, not necessarily sell it all, but they were going to take it all. No more nobles, period. No more monarchy, period. In fact, they put Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette on trial, accused them of treason, got them declared guilty, and had their heads chopped off. They got rid of all of the Catholic schools and all the other religious schools and replaced them with secular schools. One of the things that we're going to see is that they were desperately against religion in the same way that, remember, that Japan and China were afraid of Catholicism because they were afraid that people would listen to the Pope before they'd listen to the local authorities. Well, these guys take it one step further, where they're saying that not only do they not want them paying attention to the Pope, they want their allegiance to be to the state and not to a religion. They also established universal male suffrage. That meant that all the males could vote. And they even got rid of the religious holidays by completely trashing the calendar and reestablishing different days. The weeks were different lengths, the years were different lengths, and essentially so that no one could figure out when religious holidays were. In fact, they started with year one because everything was going to be based off when the revolution had occurred. This concludes discussion number 3, the National Assembly to the Legislative Assembly to the National Convention, of Chapter 6, the French Revolution and Napoleon.